Hey, what's up, guys? It's Someonedie back on this YouTube channel, and today I decided to take the time out of my day to do a reflection of the overall game development of Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2. Now, before some of you get really scared and think I'm going to take this in a really negative direction, this isn't a video of me announcing that I'm quitting the development of the game at all. This is just me documenting my journey through developing this game in general and also giving my thoughts through it. I'm hoping if there is time in the future for me that this can serve as some type of time-lapse video that I can look back upon if I ever finish development for this game or whatever happens to me in the future. Starting off with this video, Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 has been in development for almost 3 years straight. While the weapon test stage did start in June 2018, I took a break from working on the weapon test stage for a couple of months, and it was really the 1st of November 2018 was when I really started working on the game in consistent and long work sessions. When I work on a game, I usually average working on a game for 12 hours a day. Some days I work 16 hours, 14 hours, 12 hours, 10, 8, 6, or maybe even 5 hours. And I usually work for 6 days a week. I take a break on Saturdays, and sometimes I take a day-long break occasionally throughout the month. So from the time of November 1st, 2018 to now as of September 23rd, 2020, on average, I put about 9,000 hours into developing this game. I did also have some developers help me with this game, but the only roles they were able to do were animation, map modeling, or particle visuals. Noob 101 was an animator that was hired very early in the development of Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2, who helped make animations for the giant blade, sledgehammer, katana, M60, Gatling gun, trench shotgun, Tommy gun, stream thrower, dual sword, BB gun, and bazooka. He also helped with the basic explosion visuals, and that was it. Drew by the Demon was an animator that I hired more late in the development of Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2, and he helped do animations on humans and even did extra animations for the pilots and even injury animations. One Arneo was a modeler that I hired really late in the development of Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2, but he helped develop 2 maps on the game, that including Sandton and Molten Drop. And he also helped make the models for lobby games in the lobby. And while they did put in their work, and I greatly appreciate for what they did, the work they put in was very small contributions to the overall game. I did all of the scripting of the game. I did all the scripting for the NPCs, weapons, game modes, leader, and more. I did the majority of animations on everything else. I made the majority of the maps and models. I still had to fulfill every other role as the developer. And afterwards, in the end, all of the other developers ended up retiring for various reasons. So with that said, a question that is kind of often asked to me in my Discord chat is this: how do you feel about Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2? To put it simply, I am very proud and very appreciative of this game. I consider this game to be one of my greatest failures and one of my greatest successful games that I ever made. Some of you are looking at me like, huh? How could you consider this game one of your best failures and one of your most successful games? And before I can explain that, I'll first explain why I appreciate it so much by first explaining the origins and the growth of the Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon series. The first Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon series first started in 2014. I was really young back then, but I was very passionate and inspired back then as a game developer. I was still a really massive fan to Super Evil Asmel in his Noobs vs. Zombie 2.0 game and really loved the Zombies Onslaught back in the days. I was pretty much a very happy child back in the days, especially ever since I got permission to work on this game. I don't exactly remember how I really came up with the concept of Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon series. It was definitely influenced by Noobs vs. Zombies. It also might have been inspired from Stick Wars as well. But at the time though, I thought I developed a really incredible game for my time. The original Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon had planes and sieges and artillery and a variety of maps and tycoons and game modes and unique bosses. A lot of cool concepts originated from there, which I'm pretty sure helped even innovate it and inspire Super Evil Asmel himself, even though if he doesn't want to admit it. The game was also very popular to me during this time, and while it never became as popular as Relish, I still really appreciated the audience that was able to attract as a young kid. I did everything that I could to try to keep the audience engaged in my buggy games that I beloved, and was trying to update it every single day, even though I had school, and was apologizing to people when I missed a day of update. I was also making a considerable amount of profit from the game, since tickets were still available and I was selling VIP game passes. I then worked on Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon remake in 2016. This is where even more cooler concepts and ideas were introduced in the game. The leader-like mechanic was expanded more appropriately in this game, and there was way more NPCs and weapons, and the battles were much more larger and chaotic, even if the game didn't have any boats or flying helicopters or active attacking planes. Hilariously though, the game only made 200 Robux throughout its entire development, especially since tickets discontinued through the game, and the game was way less popular than Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 1. It was still pretty fun developing this game as a whole, especially since during that time I had a very mutual scripting rivalry going on with the Golden PP Warrior. Looking back on those games as well, I greatly appreciate the amount of growth that I was able to achieve within those years as a game developer. Seeing the series where it first started and how evolved it became till now is really amazing transformation to see. A lot of scripting challenges that I thought I would never have been able to do, I've been able to do now. And the fact that I'm still able to hold an audience that are engaged in my games is something that I'll never take granted for, even if it may seem like a small audience. 2018 was when Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 started to begin its development, and that's when one of the biggest development struggles first began. One thing that's hard on me when I start making games on Roblox nowadays is that now because I'm able to earn money off of my games, I feel like I'm required to hold myself and meet a professional quality level. Meaning, if I feel like I'm cheesing development, I feel kind of guilty and not deserving of the profit, regardless if the earnings are small or great. I had this mentality for a while ever since I've been successful with Realish, and I kind of abused myself with this mentality, especially while working on this game. This mentality also affects me when I don't meet certain deadlines. Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 at one point had a very aggressive 2020 roadmap that promised so much to the fans while giving me such very hard crunch times that I weren't able to meet. Looking back on some of these milestones, the milestones set were absolutely ridiculous. I said in February, the shortest month of the year, that I was going to add anti-exploit, server hosting controls, 2 new maps, possibly 3 with Home City Rush, progression and in-game summaries, customization with both leader and character customization, and a new spaceship lobby. I specifically remember this month on how terrifyingly hard it was to tackle everything on his list, and this was the most promising month to fans. Server hosting was something I really struggled through, especially while developing it. I had to re-script it twice and it really busted me up. It took me about 10 days to finally get it working, and within that time, I'm basically already halfway through the month since I was also catching up on the month before it. Then I earned a reputation of always delaying a game, and before I knew it, the year ended, and I ended up really going through 3 to 4 months worth of content on a roadmap, and this really bummed me out. At the same time, there was also a lot of conflictions that I had to deal with, while at the same time developing Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2. Stupid crap I had to deal with was when Roblox decided to take away my original username and letting some other dude steal my account's name, and then them taking away my developers exchange for seemingly no reason temporarily in 2019. I was more so angry when they took away my name because it took a long time to earn a reputation for my name, but luckily they added nicknames like sometime later. I had problems with my own community, especially in the early developments of the game. Some people were just incredibly aggravating and problematic. Oh, oops. And then I'll be doing stupid stuff myself and falsely threatening to purge people. I'm never going to purge or falsify a purge against my fans ever again. That's retarded. That's retarded. And I'm just rather going to do the console system. I'm never doing that again. Another thing that ticked off people in my own community was when I publicly announced that I wanted Vanta Black to close down his Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon retro game. And while I wasn't in the right to do this, it was something I'm still kind of sad to do. Not because it pissed off my community, but because it was a really awesome fan creation of the game that I really liked. When people make fan creations of my games, it makes me feel very hyper and tingly, if those are really good words to describe my feelings. Games like Mutant Testing Reborn, made by Siki, are prime examples of how awesome fan creations can be that it just makes me feel so tingly, especially when they do new creative ideas for it. I think a lot of times, since I'm a fan of games and my fans are a fan of games, seeing a fan being a fan of my game reminds me of myself when I was a happy little kid, and it just helps inspire me. Another thing that I had to deal with while developing Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 was the conflicts that I had with EAE, another community. It was bizarre to have to deal with them again after so long and having to deal with this reoccurring old conflict for weeks, but I'm so glad that conflict is over with them and ended peacefully, because things could have gotten so much worse between us, and it would have just ended again. I'm just so glad it's over. I'm so glad it's over with them. I'm just so glad. Oh my goodness. And lastly, I had to deal with unfortunate personal development problems. I nearly had a heart attack when my old hard drive crashed, because I remember specifically during that time that when I was working on the remaster maps that I had everything saved on that hard drive. But what happened before that was when I used to use Notepad Plus, all my files would randomly get corrupted and become nil for no reason. And I remember I lost a lot of very detailed map design notes for the game, a lot of analytical notes, a lot of personal plan rows with detailed to-do lists, which was incredibly frustrating because those notes really help keep the flow of development airtight. And now the reason why I mentioned all those side problems was because these were problems I had to deal with on the side, while also at the same time going through really hard on developing Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 for an average of 12 hours a day for the past 2 years, and at the same time having to keep my composure and staying focused. I did have to take a break from Discord though at the end of 2020, because I feel like I really disappointed everyone and even myself, and I had to take a break from just communicating with everyone on the internet and to hopefully refresh myself. Now the biggest reason why I consider this game one of the biggest failures is two main reasons: financial payoff and development payoff. A lot of times people kind of retort immediately when I say that the game fails financially, because they see that 700 people bought the game for 1,000 Robux and see that I have made a profit of 490,000 Robux and say that I'm well off. It's a lot of Robux, and on a developer exchange, this is worth $1,750, which is pretty good. But here's an issue. The game became game assets in December 11, 2018 and became free on April 1st, 2020. That means in the time length of 1 year and 4 months, I make 109.37 cents a month. And keep in mind, I'm working on average 12 hours a day throughout the time for 6 days a week. The lowest federal minimum wage available in the US is $7.25 an hour. That means if you work 15 hours in the state with the lowest minimum wage job, you will exceed the earnings I have made from Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 within a month in the game asset stage. The earnings that I made from donations from April 2020 till now are nearly 3 times lower, earning 177,800 Robux in 1 year and 5 months, which is about $622, meaning I earn $36.60 every month from donations. No human being on the earth would ever willingly work on average 12 hours a day for the past 2 years to only make $110 a month or $36 a month. A huge majority of my sustainability was and still is heavily relied on the earnings I make on Realish. This is not to say that it's impossible for the game to get financial stability, because all I have to do is add pre-order game passes and I'm set. But this is to say that I've been incredibly patient with the game's development. I wasn't this patient with any of my previous games. Realish practically sold an incomplete game pass at the end of its development with the injected game pass, and I don't want to offer game passes in the game if they aren't going to be ready to be handled and if they may mess up the development flow. Don't feel any pity for me, but please do acknowledge how little I am earning from the game as of right now, despite the amount of work I'm putting in. And for all of those who donated, I thank you and I appreciate all of you greatly. Now, when people hear me say that this game fails in development payoff, a lot of times people get confused because the game isn't terrible. and they don't understand what kind of payoff is to be expected. So I'll explain briefly. Usually when developers make updates to their games, they sometimes tease the update first of what's to come, and when they add updates to their games, they usually add updates to improve the game and generate hype for the game with the new content added, and have people appreciate the update added into the game and be amazed of what's added into it and help encourage people to thumbs up the game. Many of the updates for the game don't generate a lot of hype for the game regardless of how great they were. While updates now don't really introduce game-breaking bugs often anymore, they were incredibly frequent in the past. Many of the elements in the game had to be redone so many times. Maps in the game all had to be remastered, besides the war arenas and all that. Some of them had to be updated like 3 or 4 times, like Cold Warfare and High Assembly, and those maps were changed really often. AI in the game is now progressively getting re-scripted over time. Many of the weapons in the game had to be re-scripted entirely. Many of the rockets had to be redone entirely. The game script that handles all the game modes had to be re-scripted. And I redid, like, scripting wise, all of the visuals in the game. There were just so many other things that I had to redo and re-script a lot of times. And I had to redo a lot of things, not for just optimization purposes, but also because developing a game like this is really difficult with all the game design rules that you have to meet. Sometimes it gets really incredibly frustrating when you're redoing something for like the 5th time. And development payoff is so low because not too many people get hype about it. New bugs and glitches and exploits are introduced, and a lot of times when you have to constantly keep on changing the game, you may end up losing players because they're not accustomed to all the new changes you did. And then you have to deal with the game's like and dislike ratio being incredibly low when it used to be incredibly so high in the past. And it's just, ugh. One of the biggest reasons why this game is one of the most successful games to me is because of the amount of things I've been able to accomplish as a game developer. This game has been an incredible challenge to make and has helped me grow exponentially and has helped me learn a lot and form me really well. For starters, this game has one of the best AI on the Roblox platform, at least, top 1,000. And it has a lot of commendable variety of AI. You have your plane AI that flies around as a plane and fights in a plane-like manner doing strifes and all that. You have your helicopter AI that are pretty simplistic, but they still animate really well and are still really cool, especially with flares and all that. You have your boat AI, which are really outdated and overly simplistic right now, but will soon be rescripted in the future to function much better. You have your siege AI, which are really outdated and overly simplistic, but they have artillery behaviors and tank-like behaviors and are really fascinating to have. You have your infantry AI that are very sociable and have the highest vocal dialogue count of all of Roblox. They are capable of showing emotions like fear, and they can use multiple weapons and pick up weapons. It can fit multiple other roles like being healers and repairmen and much more. They feel so alive and have so much personality to them, and are almost sometimes more dependable than players. And while the AI aren't super duper smart, like they aren't capable of taking cover or can drive vehicles or have a custom fighting algorithm or even have the best combat mechanics, especially bosses. Those are pretty wacky as of right now. There's still something I am really proud of developing and deserving to be called one of the best on Roblox hands down. I learned to do so many difficult challenges that I never would have been able to dream of doing in the past. I briefly mentioned how hard it was to do server hosting, but many other challenges I had to do, such as detail weapons, stats, and medals, bosses, doing bosses and mini bosses, doing all of the weapons and having to do NPC weapons, anti-exploit, doing leader building, all that, having to doing all the optimization hacks that I did, having to do all those remasters, having to do customization, all the visualizations, all the blood, all the splitting in half and all that, doing all the modeling, well, not all of it, but doing a lot of modeling like the UFOs and all that, and so many other aspects of the game was just a challenge to do. This game has one of the most unique gameplays on the platform. It's completely uncomparable and practically uncompetable with other Roblox games. You can compare a lot of the alternate game modes like survival and war arena and battle to other games, but the leader versus leader game modes like standard and adrenaline are unmatchable. There's so much action and there's so much death and blood and variety of combat going on, and there's strategy to a degree. It's a really great piece of work I got going on. Just making it a functioning reality is a great accomplishment I value as a developer. Not to bash on anyone, but most developers can't even get a simple survival game right. Being able to amass the community that I have achieved in Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon is something I'm most proud of. Not every single aspect of it is good, of course. I can't thoroughly say that everyone inside a Roblox game is a good community member, and there's a freaking subgroup of people making fucking porn on the game on Twitter, and even wilder subgroups in other areas of the community. But the community on the Discord has been pretty awesome within recent years, though. A lot of old members that have been around ever since the glory days of Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 1, and even Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon Remake are still around. There's a lot of members that I value in the community, and even the people that do get on my nerves in that community have been pulling the strings of my heart and have been such a joy to conversate in there. Reminds me of the old times of Realist where I just had fun conversating in the chat for hours back in the days, and it's also been able to be a successful spot to host King battles where we just live stream competitive battles where we all just get together and watch or compete, and we also have game nights in there as well, and it's just been real fun. I made a ton of mistakes while developing this game, but I'm grateful for the amount of mistakes I've done, and it just helped me learn even more. This game has changed me drastically as a game developer and will be one of my most proudest achievements at the end. Looking back on this game in the future when I'm finished is going to be really interesting. When I look back on my really old games, I generally remember the awesome ideas and dreams I had for those games, and the fun time I had being a happy kid developing those games with no worries. Same goes for Realist, but the hard times while developing Realist was really outweighed by the joyful first time being successful accomplishment that I had, while still having a lot of fun. But Noobs vs. Zombies Tycoon 2 will be one of those special games where I look back upon it in the future, and it'll be one of those games where I look back on it like, wow, I can't believe I survived through this and even pushed myself to finish that game. Because this is one of the most painful games that I ever developed on Roblox. And by painful, I don't mean painful in a way where it's not fun to develop this game, because I generally enjoy developing this game. I love scripting, animating, voice acting, and handling all of the rules for this game and trying to make it as cool as possible. I wouldn't keep on developing this game if I didn't enjoy doing it, but I would be lying if I said there weren't some days where I experienced total burnout and complete exhaustion, especially mentally. There has been multiple days where I did consider quitting this game years ago. I had like this formatted folder in my old hard drive where I would have a documentation made explain why I would discontinue the game, but I backed down from it. I still believe there's a chance this game can succeed despite what I said about it at the beginning of its production, and I still want this to be the first Roblox game that I ever finished. And when I do finish this game will be, for me, remembered for being one of the hardest and one of the biggest projects and one of the biggest development struggles that I ever have in years. This game is one of my most passionate and one of my most beloved projects that I ever done. There's so much more that I want to do with this game, and I'm sorry if I don't meet my own established deadlines, or if I don't react to feedback quickly, or if I even offended some of you during those years, or if I took too many breaks. But for all of you, please continue to be patient, and after I'm done with this project, I can only get better from here on out, unless the world ends. But anyways, if you made it this far and listened all the way through, thank you for watching, and yeah.